Thank you, Chair. And I will be brief, but I just want to say, listen, it is very much appreciated the work you do, and I always find it quite challenging when you come in, even though I come in at the very end. But I find the reports extremely helpful in your contributions here. Just starting off, obviously there's been a benefit of the promissory notes. And if you take it, if we make another 2 billion savings in 2014, and 400 million of that would be in social protection. Our growth, basically, and we've covered it earlier on, has been kind of supported by economic and our exports, but that's starting to taper off now because of the problems in the European zone and in England, and also the gains we've made in the competitiveness have started to taper off, and we've seen the benefit of that, which kind of leads me to the question on page 11. You kind of cover the area where domestic demand has a tendency to be overestimated, and I'm just wondering, have you put any thought into it? If that we just took a breather and we spent approximately the billion savings to look at not cutting back or cutting our expenditure on social protection, education, and social welfare. What would the knock-on effect to that in the domestic economy and confidence within the domestic economy? Have you looked at that area at all, or have you a view on that? I don't know, do you want me just to go through three, or the three very brief ones? It's just, I think Sebastian might be, say you were looking at this, I'm just wondering, is this what you're talking about? In relation to the structural balance, and like, to me, the major contributory factor that is high unemployment. Again, having the knock-on effect of on domestic demand, and the unsustainability construction in the industry and the retail industry are currently on the floor. Have you done any kind of examples or profiling of what would happen to our structural deficit if unemployment dropped by 20%? 5%, 10%, and is that kind of the profiling that you're looking at for your next report, or is it worthwhile looking at in your next report? I just don't see that. And then, look, it's a question basically on property tax, and like I would agree fundamentally on the property tax. It's not how it is, but there's kind of a dogma that you tax property, you don't tax labour, you encourage growth. But you deal a little bit of this on page 80. I'm just wondering, is there any analysis, like we're in a very different circumstances. We're starting a property tax from scratch during a very harsh economic cycle. And has any research been done of the impact of confidence in, certainly in our domestic growth and confidence in growth, everything, that leads on to spending within the market, and Deputy Higgins touched on it slightly in what he was asking. So I'm just looking at this like, I would come from the area that I would support property tax, but I'm just looking to see is there an analysis of actually introducing it into an economy such as ours from scratch.
Did you first?
Maybe I'll take this a bit on the third one as well. Okay. So just in terms of the structural balance and unemployment, I mean, the specific point we make in the report is if you look at the official estimates of the potential output, they seem to understate how deep the cyclical problems are now. And the main component of that, at least in what the European Commission does, seems to relate to unemployment, where they interpret basically all of the unemployment that's there today as being structural. Now, it seems to us that that's implausible, and so there's clearly a cyclical effect there. But I think it does point to the fact, and again, as we always say, a lot of uncertainty around this, that structural unemployment is clearly likely to be higher than it was in the past, in particular because of job losses, for example, in the construction sector, where there's a whole category of people and skills that are unlikely to be required in the same amounts in the future. And I think that does point in terms of a public policy conclusion, which is I think it's very important that the labour market policies work effectively and that a solution is found for this group group of people who are going to be difficult to reintegrate into other jobs. So I think that points to an area, and it may be that there's some public spend, at least some public policy effort, but maybe even some spending around that should be prioritised, because it's very important that unemployment doesn't become hardwired, in the sense that you want to make sure that at some point those people start paying taxes again and stop relying on benefits. So I think there is a policy conclusion from that. Just in terms of the property tax, I know it's a very sensitive issue in Ireland. I think from the perspective of the OECD, where it's my kind of day job, I think we see property taxes in the long run as being a form of taxation that has a number of benefits, and so it's a tax that most countries apply. In some sense, it can be expected to have a relatively low impact on long-term growth prospects compared to, say, taxing labour directly. And I think even in the short term, it would be seen as not being the most harmful of taxes to increase. And I'm sure I could find you OECD papers that would support that. But of course, I think one of the things you've been asking about is the impact on confidence, and of course that's a very difficult thing to measure, and even that may not have a lot of proportion in terms of lots of other taxes have gone up as well, but it may be the ones that are most obvious to people have the greatest psychological impact. But I'm just speculating.
So just on your first question, Deputy Humphreys, so you're really getting at sort of the essence of the sort of the trade-off that we examine when we assess the fiscal stance. So if you were to reduce the adjustments by the 1.66 billion, that would probably improve GDP, nominal GDP, in the case of our model, by about 800 million. So that certainly would be quite a significant benefit. Currently, we estimate that there's about a 1 in 3 chance, as I mentioned earlier, that the 3% target won't be hit, even if you do the 5.1 billion in adjustments. That would probably rise to maybe, Dermot, you might remember the exact number, probably by about 10 percentage points. So you're probably talking about something close to 45, maybe close to 50% chance of not meeting that target. So that is sort of the trade-off that you're looking at. But I think that the costs associated with not meeting the target would be greater if it was the result of us not implementing the plan that we had initially agreed to. So, I think it compounds the fact that we would have missed the targets. The reason it came about, it wasn't just because of adverse growth shocks, it's because we didn't implement the plan that had been set out and agreed. But it is, these are judgment calls, and there are trade-offs to be made here, and we absolutely understand that people may weigh these things differently. But given what we've achieved so far in the programme in terms of regaining the creditworthiness of the state, really ensuring that the state has the borrowing capacity that it needs, I think it would be a pity to risk those gains more than we need to. Now, there is risk anyway because of the uncertainty around the growth picture, but by not following through on the planned adjustments, our judgment is that is a risk that at this point is not worth taking. But as came up in the earlier discussion, if the growth picture would to come out better and it looked like we're going to meet the target with less adjustments, that is, I think, something that could be considered as we got closer to the end of 2015.
I was just going to make a quick point on property taxes. Again, as I've explained to the chairman, I'll then have to leave, so apologies for that. In terms of comparing property taxes to other taxes, and you brought up this element of confidence, I think it would be very hard to make an argument that in some sense, a property tax would be more damaging to confidence or less damaging. Okay, so in the suite of taxes that you might choose, I think the point Sebastian was saying, I think most economists in the analysis would show this, that in terms of economic efficiency, a property tax is a good way to go. But let's move very, very quickly say the real arguments against property taxes are the distributional issues. It's whether or not it is a fair tax. Okay, I think there's general agreement that it's economically a sensible tax, but you can make a very good case for saying that it's not a fair tax. And of course, one of the great dilemmas of property tax is the way you make it fairer is you try and relate it to income in some shape. So you start giving exemptions for low-income people. But of course, once you start doing that, well, then you start getting your property tax to look like an income tax, so you lose some of the benefits. So in the design of these sort of things, it's terribly, terribly difficult, but I'm making just the point partly because I can see Deputy Higgins...
tax, Professor Barrett. It's coming from workers' wages.
No, but it's not on income. You are right. I mean, in the same way, like a sales tax comes out...
That's semantics.
No, it's not. I mean, I think it's important that we're discussing the same thing. It's not a tax on income. Of course it comes out, but I mean, every tax in a sense then is an income tax on that logic.
And workers,
Oh, well, everybody pays it, you know. But I think that...
I can't be getting this. I know, excuse me. It's Deputy Humphreys has the floor.
Anyway, I'm going to leave on that particular note, but we can, and apologies again for having to do so.
You're a wise man. Just one slight follow-up, and maybe I didn't explain the question on the structural balance or deficit correctly. Like, the construction industry, to take it for an example, is now operating at below a sustainable level. Because if you look at the population growth, it should be operating at a slightly higher level now to replace it. So I'm just saying, is it worthwhile looking at a growth in that area? You know currently, just increased demand for family homes, 3 bedrooms. So we should start to see a growth in the construction industry, just as an example. I'm just wondering, if we look slightly forward, that we can see a start of growth in that kind of employment and a drop off of unemployment by 20%, and we receive a subsequent drop in social welfare, health spending, and a boost of tax. Have you done profiling of what effect that would have on the Irish economy going into the future?
So that is no, we haven't done that explicitly. I think some of that is, some of that will be captured by the cyclical recovery. So if you look at the projections from the Department of Finance that we're assessing when investment picks up, that's partly because of construction investment. But I think a deeper point, which relates to something that's said in the report, is also that it would be helpful to have a much more developed analysis of potential output and what we think the trend is for the economy. At the moment, there's not a huge amount of formalised thinking about that. And the kind of point that you make, that the construction industry won't be at the level it was before, but it won't be at the level that it's now in the future, and thinking through in terms of the structural factors that will drive that, in terms of the population and the need for housing and demographic factors, I think that's the kind of thing that should be built on in the future, so that we try and have a clearer idea of where the economy is heading by thinking more carefully about how it's kind of going to work.
We have looked at, say, the impact of growth being a bit stronger on the deficit, but we haven't actually gone into that sort of level of detail of specific sectors, but maybe it's something we might consider. I know the SRI are in the process of doing their medium-term review, and they'll have, I think, maybe high growth scenarios and low growth scenarios, so they're probably the best body to do those sort of that sort of detailed analysis.
Thank you.
Which is obviously the construction and the retail, and obviously that's where we can actually break down that structural unemployment. Thanks, Chair.
Our final contributor